I figured out how I'm going to get the extra travel out of it, and I'm going to use this bottle cap. Fortunately, creating parts that never existed are pretty easy. All you do is start with a raw material and remove the part you're not going to use, which is the part that goes around and secures it to the bottle. I'll put a sanding wheel on this and deburr the edges of this plastic and get it ready. You won't believe how simple this is. Maybe you will. Alright, I'm still in the process of removing everything that isn't the part, but what I've done is I put a screw through the center of this. And just a side note, it says recycle bottle with cap on. I would be willing to bet that the only real decent plastic worth recycling on a whole bottle is probably the cap, and somebody's just going to get a crappy bottle. But anyway, the rest is just cutting out what remains that is not a piece of the part that I need, and it'll be done. Oh, I have to punch one more hole in it for the shock, so no problem there. That's simple enough. The next one, the next hole, can't be a pivot like this though. The next hole has to be able to hold the threads. Not a problem. Alright, what you see here is a wheel that cannot turn because I have pie cut it in order to lock onto this piece. Now, when I want to add any type of, I'm going to mount the shock a little differently than it was. It's going to mount kind of at the same height, but it will have a little bit of a angle on it now, which is fine. It doesn't matter. And it will still have the same amount of compression. But what's going to happen is I'm going to cut away this material right here in the bottom of the picture right here, and that will allow this wheel to turn and give me the downward droop that I'm looking for. And then what I'll eventually do is just cut the top of this off so that I can put a body over it, although it looks pretty cool like that. Another thing that's pretty slick that I hadn't intended on, but since I punched the hole right in the middle, I can use these words that go around the cap as a cutting guide. So I'll probably notch it right here, and that will give me quite a bit more droop, I think. And if I need more, I can always cut more, but I don't want to cut too much or I'll have to start off with a whole new bottle cap, and the recycle people might not be happy. I've already got some rotation there, so what I just have to do is bolt it on tight, figure out where the shock sits level, and put a hole in it and tighten it down. With this right here, I've given it some ride height adjustability. I can secure the upper shock mount into any one of these holes, and I'll figure out which one works the best. And once it sits the way I want it to sit, I'll tune it by taking the corner of this off as needed until I get the amount of flex I want. I have noticed that with no shock at all, this is all of the articulation you get out of the rear axle. So it's not a whole lot to begin with, but it'll be a lot more. And I do this one side because that extra droop will really help you when going over peaks when it's trying to frame out the chassis. Also, it'll help just going over terrain that's large. I tend to weight the front of my car and have the back be a pivot so that I really only have to worry about what the front does. The back can't tip it over. I've got the shocks sitting about the same height at the top of both of them, and what you're going to see now is the magic. What I just have to do is take out the appropriate amount, and this angle here will give me the droop I want just by removing the material here. And that word arc is a perfect guide. So I'm just gonna take a little bit at a time until I get that droop out of the back axle that I want. Right now it sits about level, but as you saw with no shock, that's tunable now. So here we go. Alright, rather than the scientific wild guess method of determining droop, I can just put the screw in partially and dial the droop I want. So I don't think I'd want it to go past there, but I do want that droop to there. So I'm going to mark it with my pen, which in this case is a knife. Right there. And I'm going to get maximum droop out of this side, and that will not affect the way it climbs. It will affect how it descends though, because it'll let the rear of the truck rise, but not building it for big descents anyway, because, well, I'm just not. It will be cool to drive over stuff and climb well though, so I think it's worth the trade-off. And this is what it operates like. I now have the full droop of the suspension, still with the stock ride height on springs. Look at that. I don't want the shock to go more than center, so I left it a little bit tipped forward, because if it can rotate past center, then it could just flip around the wrong way, and that becomes its own problem. So any more and that would have been too much. So I got the perfect amount out of that to get full droop. So the only thing left to do is shorten the screws on the back so they don't protrude farther than they need to, and then remove the top part of this that I don't need, because it's going to get into the body. So I can literally draw a line. Well, I'll show you the tape. I'll tape it off and I'll show you. So you see everything I don't need is blue, and I'm gonna leave the bottom part of the wheel there. I could chop into this and cut out some of the bottom if I wanted to, but I'm gonna leave it on, because otherwise you can't read the with cap on, because that's, I don't know, part of the history of the part, I guess. So I'm gonna cut off what isn't part of the part, and this will be done. This is the final product right here. Look at that. That's way more droop than stock, clearly. And that's going to help it when it goes over peaks, because I'll be able to get that one wheel down and it'll push it over. Also, the back end won't be able to necessarily just tip the thing over, because now it can actually pivot. I could do the same thing on the other side, but if I do, it'll be really good for crawling over stuff, but it will ruin its climbing ability, which is already compromised due to these stupid huge tires. So that's all for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Go build something. Have a good week. Talk to you later.